Captain Jake Morrison, stood in the waiting area outside the Galactic Council chambers and watched alien representatives laugh at something on their data screens. He could not hear what they were saying, but he knew they were talking about humans. Again, they always were. For 30 years now, humans had been the joke of the galaxy, and Jake was getting tired of it. Dr. Linda Hayes walked up beside him, carrying a heavy case filled with documents and evidence. She looked as tired as Jake felt. They had been traveling from world to world for months, trying to gather proof that humans had legal rights to their colonies. The evidence was solid, but Jake knew it would not matter. It never did when humans were involved. "They're calling us in now," Linda said as she adjusted her formal diplomatic uniform. The fabric was made from earth silk, and it was one of the few things that reminded Jake of home. Earth seemed very far away right now as they walked through doors that were too tall for humans and into a chamber designed for beings much larger than themselves. The Galactic Council chamber was a massive dome that could hold 10,000 representatives from across the known galaxy. Most of the seats were empty today because this was just another human problem, and most species did not care about human problems. Only the major powers had bothered to send anyone, and they were here to divide up human territory among themselves. High Counselor Morden floated above the center of the chamber in his energy form. The ancient being had been running these meetings for over 1,000 years, and he had made it clear many times that he found humans amusing but irrelevant. His voice echoed through the chamber as he called the session to order. "We are here to discuss the territorial disputes involving the human colonies," Morden announced in a tone that suggested he had already made up his mind. "The Zephyrian Empire has presented claims to the agricultural world the humans call New Montana. The crystalline hegemony claims rights to the asteroid mining facility in the Gamma 7 belt. The Aquatic Federation demands removal of the human research station from their sacred waters." Ambassador Zixthella of the Vectari clicked her mandibles in what passed for amusement among her insect species. She had been pushing for human removal from border territories for years, and today looked like her lucky day. The other alien representatives nodded in agreement. Even though they had not heard any evidence yet, Jake stepped forward to present the human case. He had been a military officer before becoming a diplomat, and he still carried himself like a soldier. His voice was steady as he began to speak, but he could see that most of the aliens were not even pretending to listen. "Honored representatives," Jake began, "humanity legally purchased the settlement rights to New Montana from the previous inhabitants 47 years ago. We have the contracts and payment records. We terraformed a dead world and turned it into fertile farmland that now feeds 12 systems. Over 2 million humans call it home." The Zephyrian representative waved a clawed hand dismissively. "Ancient star charts show that world belongs to our empire. Your human documents mean nothing compared to our historical claims." Linda stood up with her datapad ready. As a xenobiologist, she had spent years studying alien cultures, and she knew their laws better than most of them did. The Terran Federation followed all proper procedures according to galactic law. 2847b, the previous inhabitants were fairly compensated, and they signed transfer documents that were registered with the Council Trade Authority. "Irrelevant," clicked Ambassador Zixtala. The insect queen of her hive gestured with multiple arms as she spoke. "Humans are Deathworld creatures who should be grateful we allow them any territory at all. Your species is too dangerous to be trusted with valuable worlds." The irony was not lost on Jake. Humans were called Deathworlders because they came from Earth, which was considered one of the most dangerous planets in the galaxy. Most alien species came from gentle worlds with stable climates and few natural predators. Earth had everything from hurricanes to earthquakes to creatures that could kill with poison or claws or teeth. Yet despite coming from such a harsh world, humans had spent 30 years being the most peaceful species in galactic politics. The crystalline representative spoke next in a voice that sounded like breaking glass. "The geometric patterns of the asteroid belt are sacred to our people. Human mining operations disturb the cosmic harmony. They must cease immediately." Jake pulled up holographic displays showing the mining colony. The Gamma 7 facility processes raw materials that we sell to 17 different species at cost. We make no profit from this operation. It exists purely to help other civilizations access resources they need. Your motivations do not matter, the crystal being replied. Sacred geometry supersedes economic concerns. The Aquatic Federation representative gurgled through his translation device. The research station pollutes pure waters with alien thoughts. Our psychic coral reefs are becoming contaminated with human emotions. This cannot be allowed to continue. Linda stepped forward with her scientific data. Our research station has actually improved the local ecosystem. We have increased biodiversity by 30%, and our medical research has led to treatments that have saved millions of lives across the galaxy. Lives of inferior species, gurgled the aquatic alien. Pure water must remain pure. Jake felt his hands clench into fists, but he forced himself to remain calm. This was exactly what had happened every time humans tried to present their case to the council. Evidence was ignored. Legal documents were dismissed. Scientific proof was called irrelevant. The other species had already decided what they wanted. And they used council meetings to make it look official. High Counselor Morden called for the vote without allowing any more human testimony. The numbers appeared on the main display as each representative cast their decision. 847 votes for forcing human evacuation. Only 3 votes against. The humans and 2 minor allied species that depended on human trade for survival. The motion passes. Morden announced, human colonies will evacuate the disputed territories within 30 standard days. This session is concluded. Jake and Linda gathered their unused evidence and walked out of the chamber in silence. Behind them, they could hear alien representatives already discussing how to divide up the human territories among themselves. The Zephyrians wanted the farmland. The Crystallans wanted the mining rights. The Aquatics wanted to destroy the research. Station completely dark. As they walked through the station corridors, Jake noticed a group of young alien diplomats pointing at them and laughing. One of them said something about pet Deathworlders who think they have rights, and the others found this hilarious. Jake had heard similar comments hundreds of times over the years, but today it felt different. Today it felt like the last straw. They passed a memorial wall that honored beings who had died in various conflicts over the past century. Jake stopped at a small section dedicated to human casualties. The largest plaque remembered the 12,000 colonists who died when crystalline forces accidentally bombarded the human settlement on New Berlin 5 years ago. The official investigation concluded it was a navigation error, but everyone knew the truth. The plaque read, "They died believing in galactic justice," and Jake stared at those words for a long time. Linda waited beside him, understanding that something important was happening in his mind. Finally, Jake reached for his secure communication device and composed a short encrypted message to Earth. "The nice approach has failed," he typed. "Recommend. Protocol 7. He sent the message and felt something change inside himself. For 30 years, humans had tried to be the reasonable ones in a galaxy full of bullies and tyrants. They had absorbed insults and accepted unfair treatment because they believed that eventually justice would win. But Jake was beginning to understand that some problems could not be solved with patience and diplomacy. As they boarded their transport ship to return to human space, Jake looked back at the council station one last time. He wondered if the aliens inside realized they had just made the biggest mistake in galactic history. Probably not. They still thought humans were just clever animals who could be pushed around forever. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Admiral Ryan Cooper received Jake Morrison's message while standing on the observation deck of Luna Station. The old military base orbited Earth's moon and served as headquarters for the human colonial defense force. Ryan had been expecting this message for years, but it still hit him like a punch to the gut. Protocol 7 meant that 30 years of peaceful diplomacy were officially over. Ryan was 62 years old and had fought in more wars than he cared to remember. The Unity Wars against the AI Rebellion had cost him his left leg and most of his friends. The Titan mining conflicts had taken his brother and nearly destroyed human expansion into the outer system. But those were human problems fought with human enemies. What was coming next would be something entirely different. He walked to his command center and activated the secure communication array. Within minutes, he was connected to human colony leaders across the galaxy. The faces that appeared on his screens belonged to people he had known for decades. They were farmers and miners and scientists who had left Earth to build new lives among the stars. Now they were about to become something else entirely. "Ladies and gentlemen," Ryan began, "you all know why I'm calling. The Galactic Council has ordered us to abandon our homes. They expect us to pack up and leave like good little pets. I am here to tell you that we have another option." Mayor Bill Thompson appeared on the screen from New Montana. He was a big man with graying hair and eyes that had seen too much hardship. His left arm had been replaced with a mechanical prosthetic after the terraforming accident that killed his wife and daughter 15 years ago. He had turned a dead world into a garden, and he was not about to give it up without a fight. Admiral Bill said in his calm voice, "My people voted this morning. 2.3 million colonists, and every single one of them chose to stay. We did not come this far to surrender to alien bullies. What do you need from us?" Similar responses came from colony leaders across human space. The asteroid miners said they would rather die than abandon their facilities. The researchers declared that their work was too important to lose. The farmers talked about soil they had spent decades enriching with their own sweat and blood. Not one colony leader suggested evacuation. Commander Lisa Park was Ryan's specialist in covert operations. She had spent the last 10 years traveling to supposedly abandoned human outposts and maintaining equipment that officially did not exist. Lisa was small and quiet, but she had personally eliminated more enemy agents than most people knew existed. Her job was about to become much more important. "Lisa," Ryan said, "activate all the dark sites. It is time to bring our hidden assets online." Lisa nodded and began typing commands into her secure terminal. Across human space, automated systems began waking up in facilities that had been mothballed years ago. Weapon stockpiles that were supposed to have been destroyed started running self-diagnostic tests. Orbital platforms disguised as weather monitoring stations began charging their defensive systems. The galaxy thought humans had disarmed after joining the Council 30 years ago. They believed human military technology was primitive and limited to small defensive forces. This was exactly what humans had wanted them to believe. The truth was that humanity had never stopped preparing for war. They had just gotten better at hiding it. Chief Engineer Gary Chun managed the largest deception of all. For 20 years, he had overseen construction projects throughout human space that appeared to be civilian infrastructure. Orbital shipyards, built cargo vessels and research stations. Deep space facilities processed raw materials and manufactured consumer goods. Mining platforms extracted resources from asteroids and moons. What the aliens did not know was that every single facility had been designed with military conversion in mind. Cargo ships could become troop transports or missile platforms within hours. Research stations could manufacture weapons and ammunition. Mining platforms could launch kinetic bombardments at enemy fleets. Gary had turned the entire human colonial network into a military machine disguised as peaceful industry. "Gary," Ryan said over the communication link, "how long do we need to convert the civilian infrastructure?" 48 hours for basic conversion, Gary replied. 72 hours for full military capability. The beauty of modular design is that everything fits together like building blocks. Our cargo ships are already equipped with military-grade shields and engines. We just need to install the weapon systems. The most crucial element of Protocol 7 was something only a few humans knew about. Dr. Linda Hayes had returned to Earth and was now standing in a classified facility built deep beneath the Rocky Mountains. The facility was officially listed as a geological research station, but it contained something far more valuable than rock samples. Linda walked through corridors lined with comfortable living quarters and meeting rooms. The residents of this facility were not human. They were aliens from species across the galaxy who had been secretly working with humanity for years. Some were refugees from oppressive governments. Others were revolutionaries fighting against their own corrupt leaders. All of them had one thing in common. They wanted to see the current galactic power structure destroyed. "My friends," Linda said as she addressed a gathering of over 200 alien conspirators, "the time we have been preparing for has finally arrived. Our human allies are about to stop pretending to be weak. We need to be ready to act when they make their move." The aliens in the room represented dozens of species that had been oppressed by the major galactic powers. They had been sharing intelligence with humans for years and helping to plan operations that could free their homeworlds from tyranny. Many of them had been believed dead by their own governments. All of them were eager for revenge. A former crystalline slave named Shardbreaker stepped forward. His natural crystal formations had been deliberately damaged by his former masters to mark him as property. "The hegemony believes their crystal technology cannot be defeated," he said in a voice like grinding stone. "They do not know that we have taught humans how to shatter their molecular bonds. When the time comes, we will watch their great ships fall like broken glass." Similar reports came from aliens who had escaped from Zephyrian labor camps and aquatic breeding facilities. Each species had shared their former masters' weaknesses with human intelligence officers. The galaxy's most powerful civilizations had no idea that their former victims were about to become their destroyers. Meanwhile, on New Montana, Mayor Bill Thompson was addressing his colonists via holographic broadcast. The town square of New Eden was packed with families who had spent their entire lives building something beautiful on a world that had once been dead rock. Children played between the legs of adults while their parents listened to words that would change everything. "Friends and neighbors," Bill said, "you all know about the council's decision. Some of you are scared, and I do not blame you. We are about to face the most powerful military forces in the galaxy with nothing but our determination and our faith in each other. But I want you to remember something important. We are not just farmers and miners and shopkeepers. We are the children of Earth." The crowd murmured in agreement. Every human in the colony could trace their ancestry back to the Deathworld that had forged humanity into something unique. Their grandparents had survived wars and plagues and natural disasters that would have destroyed most alien species. That heritage was about to become very important. "The aliens think we are weak because we have been peaceful," Bill continued. "They mistake our patience for cowardice and our diplomacy for surrender. They are about to learn the difference between choosing not to fight and being unable to fight." As Bill spoke, automated defense systems were coming online throughout the colony. Farming equipment was being modified to serve as weapons platforms. Irrigation systems were being converted to launch defensive missiles. The orbital mirrors that focus sunlight to help crops grow could also focus energy beams that would burn through enemy armor. The galaxy had 47 hours before the enforcement fleets arrived to begin human evacuations. What they did not know was that humans had been preparing for this moment for 30 years. Protocol 7 was not just a military response. It was a complete transformation of human civilization from peaceful explorers to something the galaxy had never seen before. Admiral Ryan Cooper looked out at Earth through the observation windows of Luna Station. The blue and green world that had given birth to humanity looked peaceful and beautiful from space. But Ryan knew that appearances could be deceiving. Earth had created the most dangerous predators in known space, and those predators had spent 3 decades pretending to be harmless. The pretending was about to end. Soon the galaxy would remember why humans were called Deathworlders. And they would learn that sometimes the most dangerous enemy is the one who has been holding back. Fleet Admiral Krikstal of the Zephyrian Empire arrived at New Montana with 400 warships and complete confidence in his superiority. The reptilian commander had conquered 18 worlds for his empire, and he expected the human agricultural colony to surrender as soon as they saw his fleet. Humans were known throughout the galaxy for avoiding conflict, and Krikstal assumed this would be no different from the dozens of other evacuations he had overseen. His massive command ship dominated the space above New Montana, while smaller vessels took positions around the planet. Crystal's sensor officers reported that the human colony had activated some kind of defensive shields, but this did not concern him. Human technology was considered primitive by galactic standards and no planetary defense could stop a properly equipped Imperial fleet. "Send the standard evacuation demand," Crystal ordered his communications officer. "Give them 1 hour to begin loading their transport ships. If they refuse, we will begin orbital bombardment of military targets." The message was transmitted to the planet's surface, and Crystal settled back in his command chair to wait. He had performed this routine so many times that he could predict exactly how events would unfold. First, the humans would try to negotiate for more time. Then they would plead for mercy. Finally, they would accept defeat and begin the long process of abandoning their homes. It always worked the same way with inferior species. What Crystal did not know was that 12 human warships were already in the system hiding behind New Montana's 3 moons. Captain Alex Turner commanded the lead vessel called Defiant, and he was watching the alien fleet through sensors that were far more advanced than anything the Zephyrians possessed. Alex had been waiting for this moment for 5 years ever since. His daughter died in the New Berlin bombardment. The Defiant looked like an ordinary human cargo hauler from the outside, but its internal structure was something entirely different. The hull was constructed from compressed carbon lattice that could absorb energy weapon impacts without damage. The engines used controlled micro-singularities to generate thrust levels that would tear apart conventional spacecraft. Most importantly, the weapon systems incorporated alien technology that humans had been secretly developing for decades. "All ships report ready," came the voice of Captain Julie Martinez from the destroyer Vengeance. Her crew had trained for this exact scenario in hidden facilities throughout human space. They knew every weakness of Zephyrian ship design, and they had practiced coordinated attack patterns that would maximize damage while minimizing their own exposure. Colonel Sam Brooks was already aboard Crystal's command ship with his special operations team. They had used personal cloaking devices to infiltrate the alien vessel while the fleet was still in hyperspace. Human technology allowed individuals to phase partially out of normal reality, making them invisible to most sensor systems. Brooks and his people had spent the last hour planting quantum charges throughout the enemy flagship on the planet's surface. General Katie Rodriguez was coordinating ground defenses from her command bunker beneath New Eden. The former Marine had fought in the brutal Martian uprising 20 years ago, and she understood exactly what it meant to defend your home against overwhelming odds. Her brown eyes showed no fear as she watched alien dropships preparing to launch from the enforcement fleet. "All defensive positions report ready," came reports from her unit commanders. The farming equipment that had fed millions of people was now configured as military hardware. Automated harvesters had become mobile missile platforms. Crop dusters had transformed into atmospheric fighters. Even the livestock facilities had been converted to manufacture ammunition and spare parts. Mayor Bill Thompson sat in his office watching the countdown timer that marked how much time remained before the alien ultimatum expired. He was not a military man, but he had learned to fight when circumstances demanded it. The mechanical arm that replaced the limb he lost in the terraforming accident now gripped a plasma rifle that could burn through most known armor types. "Citizens of New Montana," Bill announced over the colony-wide communication system, "the aliens have given us 1 hour to abandon our homes. I want everyone to know that we are not going anywhere. This world belongs to us because we made it what it is. Today we show the galaxy what happens when you threaten the children of Earth." The hour passed in complete silence from the human colony. No evacuation ships launched from the planet's surface. No surrender messages came from the colonial government. Admiral Crystal grew increasingly annoyed as his deadline approached with no response from the humans below. Perhaps they did not understand the seriousness of their situation. Crystal said to his tactical officer, "Begin charging the bombardment cannons. A few demonstrations should convince them to cooperate." At that exact moment, Colonel Brooks activated the quantum charges his team had placed throughout the command ship. The explosions were precisely timed to disable weapons and engines without completely destroying the vessel. Crystal found himself trapped in a ship that could neither fight nor flee while emergency lights flashed and damage reports flooded his command center. Captain Turner chose that moment to drop the Defiant's camouflage and reveal himself directly in front of the alien fleet. His ship appeared on Zephyrian sensors like a ghost materializing from empty space. Before the enemy could react, Turner opened fire with weapons that should not have existed on a human vessel. The Defiant's main cannon fired concentrated antimatter beams that punched through Zephyrian shields like they were made of paper. Secondary weapons launched swarms of self-guiding missiles that locked onto enemy ships and detonated with nuclear fury. In the first 30 seconds of combat, Turner's single ship destroyed 6 enemy vessels and critically damaged a dozen more. The other human ships revealed themselves at the same time, creating a crossfire pattern that trapped the alien fleet between multiple attack vectors. Captain Martinez brought vengeance in low over the planet's surface and used the gravity well to accelerate her ship to impossible speeds. Her kinetic weapons turned enemy fighters into expanding clouds of debris. General Rodriguez launched her ground-based defenses as Zephyrian dropships attempted to reach the planet's surface. Missiles rose from concealed silos throughout the agricultural zones and turned the sky into a web of contrails and explosions. The aliens had expected to face farming equipment and instead found themselves fighting a military force that had been preparing for exactly this scenario. The battle lasted 4 hours and ended with the complete destruction of the Zephyrian enforcement fleet. Not a single human ship was lost, although the Defiant took heavy damage to its forward sections. More importantly, the humans captured 847 alien survivors, including Fleet Admiral Crystal himself. Crystal was brought to the surface as a prisoner and found himself standing before General Rodriguez in the ruins of what had once been a grain processing facility. The building had been destroyed by enemy fire, but the humans around him showed no signs of defeat. If anything, they seemed energized by the violence they had just experienced. How, Crystal demanded in his translator-modified voice, how did primitive Deathworlders defeat a modern Imperial fleet? General Rodriguez removed her combat helmet and revealed the face of a middle-aged woman who had grown up in the slums of Neo-Chicago. Her dark skin bore scars from a dozen different conflicts, and her eyes held the cold calculation of a professional killer. She studied the alien commander for a long moment before answering his question. "We stopped pretending we were not predators," Rodriguez said simply. The words sent a chill through every alien prisoner who heard them. For 30 years, humans had been the galaxy's diplomats and peacekeepers. They had absorbed insults and accepted unfair treatment because they believed in justice and cooperation. But underneath that civilized exterior had always been something else entirely. Humans were the children of a world that killed everything weak or slow or unlucky. They had evolved as hunters and warriors before they became farmers and philosophers. The galaxy had mistaken their choice to be peaceful for an inability to be dangerous. That mistake had just cost the Zephyrian Empire its entire enforcement fleet. As rescue shuttles collected alien survivors, Admiral Crystal found himself thinking about everything he thought he knew about humans. They were supposed to be weak creatures who depended on alien protection. They were meant to be grateful for whatever scraps the major powers chose to give them. Instead, they had revealed themselves as something far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. The news of the new Montana victory would reach every corner of the galaxy within hours. Some species would demand immediate retaliation against the rogue Deathworlders. Others would quietly begin reconsidering their own relationships with their supposed superiors. But all of them would remember this day as the moment when humans stopped being nice. General Rodriguez looked up at the stars that were beginning to appear in New Montana's evening sky. Somewhere out there, other human colonies were facing similar challenges, and she wondered how many more alien fleets would learn the same lesson that Admiral Crystal had just experienced. The galaxy had spent 30 years teaching humans that force was the only language that mattered. President John Mitchell stood before the quantum communication array in the secure chamber beneath the White House and prepared to address the entire galaxy. The former corporate negotiator had spent his career building bridges between different groups, but today he was about to burn some of those bridges forever. The message he was about to send would change everything. News of the new Montana victory had spread across civilized space in less than 6 hours. Alien governments were demanding explanations while their military forces prepared for immediate retaliation. The crystalline hegemony had mobilized 2,000 ships under the command of War Prime Thakran, who considered the defeat of the Zephian fleet a personal insult to crystal-based superiority. "Citizens of the galaxy," Mitchell began as his words were translated into hundreds of languages and broadcast to every inhabited world. "I am speaking to you today as the elected representative of the human species. For 30 years humanity has chosen the path of peace. We have absorbed insults and accepted unfair treatment because we believed that justice would eventually prevail. That belief was wrong." Mitchell paused to let his words sink in across the galaxy. On 1,000 worlds, alien leaders were gathering to hear what the human president had to say. Most of them expected threats and demands for territory. What they got instead was something much more dangerous. "We do not seek war," Mitchell continued, "but we will no longer be victims. Human colonies will defend themselves against any force that threatens them. Human citizens will protect their homes and families, regardless of what ancient treaties or sacred geometry might say about their rights. The age of pushing humans around is over." War Prime Thakran received the message aboard his crystal flagship as his fleet prepared to jump to human space. The crystalline being was over 300 years old and had conquered dozens of worlds for his people. His body was composed of living mineral formations that could regenerate from almost any damage. He considered carbon-based life forms to be evolutionary mistakes that needed correction. "The mammals think one lucky victory makes them warriors," Thakran said to his crystal officers. "We will teach them the difference between accident and military science. Prepare the fleet for immediate departure to the human core worlds." What Thakran did not know was that Dr. Linda Hayes had spent the last 10 years learning everything possible about crystalline technology. The alien prisoners in the Rocky Mountain facility had shared every secret about crystal matrix construction and harmonic resonance frequencies. Human scientists had developed sonic weapons, specifically designed to shatter the molecular bonds that held crystalline ships together. Admiral Susan Taylor commanded the human fleet that was waiting for Thakran at the Proxima Junction hyperspace intersection. Her 400 ships were hidden among the asteroid fields and debris, clouds that made the region dangerous for normal navigation. Each vessel incorporated the best of human engineering with alien technology that had been acquired through 30 years of careful observation and secret development. Taylor was 58 years old and had commanded human exploration fleets since before the species joined the Galactic Council. She had watched aliens dismiss human capabilities while simultaneously stealing human innovations for their own use. Today she was going to show them exactly what humans could accomplish when they stopped holding back. "All ships report ready," came the voice of Captain Danny Walsh from the heavy cruiser Determination. His crew had trained in the hidden facilities that Chief Engineer Gary Chun had built throughout human space. They knew how to fight as a coordinated unit using tactics that no alien military had ever encountered. The crystalline fleet dropped out of hyperspace exactly where human intelligence had predicted they would appear. 2,000 ships arranged in the traditional crystal formation that had intimidated enemies for centuries. War Prime Thakran expected to sweep through human space like an unstoppable tide of living mineral and electromagnetic energy. Instead, he found himself trapped in a carefully prepared killing field. Admiral Taylor had positioned her ships to create overlapping fields of fire that would prevent enemy vessels from supporting each other. More importantly, she had distributed the sonic weapon systems that could turn crystalline hulls into clouds of glittering dust. "Begin the crystal rain," Taylor ordered as her fleet opened fire. The human sonic weapons produced focused sound waves that interfered with the harmonic frequencies that held crystal molecules together. Crystalline ships began to vibrate and crack as their own structural integrity was turned against them. Within minutes, the most advanced vessels in the hegemony fleet were falling apart in beautiful cascades of shattered mineral dot, but the real victory was not happening in space. As the human fleet engaged Thakran's forces quantum, communication signals were being transmitted to 17 worlds controlled by the crystalline hegemony. On each planet, enslaved species that had been oppressed for generations received weapons and tactical information that human operatives had been secretly distributing for years. The uprising began simultaneously across multiple star systems as former slaves used human-supplied weapons to attack their crystal overlords. Species that had been considered extinct revealed themselves as hidden resistance movements. Governments that had seemed stable for centuries collapsed within hours as their oppressed populations finally fought back. War Prime Thakran watched his empire crumble in real time as reports flooded in from across hegemony space. Not only was his fleet being destroyed by impossible human weapons, but his entire civilization was falling apart as subject species declared their independence. The crystalline commander realized too late that humans had been planning this rebellion for decades. How did you coordinate this? Thakran demanded over the communication channel as his flagship began to crack apart around him. How did primitives from a single world organize resistance across our entire empire? Admiral Taylor appeared on his screen with the cold smile of a predator who had been pretending to be prey for far too long. We had good teachers, she replied. Your former slaves were very helpful in explaining how your society works. They were also quite eager to see it destroyed. The battle that became known as the Crystal Rain lasted 8 hours and ended with the complete annihilation of the crystalline fleet. Human losses were minimal while enemy casualties numbered in the hundreds of thousands. More importantly, the hegemony lost 17 colonial worlds as former slave species, established their own governments with human support and protection. War Prime Thakran died in the wreckage of his shattered flagship, but not before sending a final message to the surviving crystal worlds. The Deathworlders are not what we thought they were, he transmitted as his life force faded. They are something far worse. They are liberators. The news of the Crystal Rain reached Earth just as President Mitchell was concluding his address. To the galaxy? Reports were coming in from across human space as other colonial worlds successfully defended themselves against alien enforcement actions. The pattern was always the same. Overwhelming enemy forces would arrive expecting easy victories and instead find themselves facing military technology that should not have existed. Ambassador Velter of the peaceful Aldorian species was one of the few alien leaders who understood what was really happening. His people had been allies of humanity for 20 years, and he had always suspected that humans were more dangerous than they appeared. Now he was watching his suspicions confirmed as the galaxy's power structure collapsed in a single day. They were never weak, Velter said to his aide as they watched reports of human victories flooding in from across civilized space. They were patient. They spent 30 years learning our weaknesses while we dismissed them as harmless pets. Now they are using that knowledge to reshape the galaxy. The transformation was indeed happening faster than anyone had expected. Within 24 hours of the new Montana incident, human fleets were appearing throughout the galaxy not as conquerors but as liberators. Oppressed species that had suffered under alien tyranny for centuries suddenly found themselves with human allies willing to provide weapons and tactical support. The old Galactic Council structure was collapsing as member species realized that the humans they had dismissed as irrelevant were now the most powerful military force in known space. Some governments tried to negotiate new treaties while others prepared for desperate last stands against human-supported uprisings. But the most important change was happening in the way other species looked at humans. For 30 years, Deathworlders had been seen as clever animals who could be useful but never truly dangerous. Now they were revealed as apex predators who had been choosing not to hunt. The galaxy was learning that when humans stopped being nice, they did not become evil. They became terrifying. President Mitchell concluded his address with words that would be remembered for generations. We tried diplomacy for 30 years and learned that some problems cannot be solved with patience and good intentions. Today, we begin teaching the galaxy a different lesson. When you threaten human families and human homes, you do not face human diplomats. You face the children of Earth, and we protect what is ours. 1 year had passed since the day humans stopped being nice, and the galaxy was still learning to live with the consequences. Admiral Jake Morrison walked through the corridors of the new Galactic Federation, headquarters on the neutral world of Haven Prime, and marveled at how much had changed. Where once alien representatives had dismissed human concerns with casual arrogance, they now listened carefully to every word humans spoke. The old council structure had collapsed completely within 6 months of the liberation wars as species. After species declared independence from their former oppressors, the new federation was built on very different principles. Every member species had equal voting rights, but those rights were protected by their ability to defend themselves rather than by ancient treaties that could be ignored whenever convenient. Jake had been promoted from captain to admiral after his role in triggering Protocol 7, but he still served as humanity's chief diplomatic officer. The difference was that diplomacy itself had changed. When Jake entered negotiation chambers now, the alien representatives stood up out of respect rather than remaining seated to emphasize their supposed superiority. "Admiral Morrison," said Ambassador Nexthal of the former Zephyrian territories, "people are grateful for human assistance in establishing our new government. The transition from imperial rule to democratic representation has been difficult, but your advisors have been invaluable." Jake nodded politely, but he could see the fear behind the alien's gratitude. The Zephyrian Empire had been one of the galaxy's major powers for over 1,000 years until human-supported uprisings tore it apart in less than a week. Now, the reptilian species was divided into dozens of small democratic states that depended on human protection to survive. Commander Danny Walsh led the new galactic peacekeeping force that had replaced the old Council enforcement fleets. His mixed species units included volunteers from over 50 different civilizations, but they all served under human command and followed human tactical doctrines. The sight of human ships arriving in a disputed system had become synonymous with hope for the oppressed and terror for potential aggressors. "We received another request for intervention," Danny reported to Jake during their weekly briefing. "The Methane Collective is trying to force the Silicon Valley colonies to surrender their gas mining rights. The colonists are asking for peacekeeping support." Jake studied the report on his datapad. The Silicon Valley colonies were not human settlements, but they had been established with human assistance, and they followed human principles of democratic governance. Under the new Federation Charter, they were entitled to protection from member species like humanity. "Approved," Jake said without hesitation. "Send a full battle group and make sure the collective understands that attacking Federation colonies is considered an act of war against all member species." This was the new reality that the galaxy was still adjusting to. Humans had not become conquerors after their military awakening, but they had become the guardians of anyone who asked for their protection. Species that adopted human values like democracy and individual rights found themselves with powerful allies. Those who continued to practice slavery or oppression discovered that human peacekeepers could arrive without warning. Elder Zephi was a 3,000-year-old scholar from the ancient, ethereal species who had been observing galactic politics since before most current civilizations existed. He was writing the definitive history of what academics were calling the Terran Awakening, and his work was already required reading in schools across 100 worlds. "The most remarkable aspect of the human transformation," Zephi wrote in his latest chapter, "is that they did not seek to replace the old oppressive system with a new one. Instead, they created something unprecedented in galactic history, a confederation, based on mutual protection rather than domination." Zephi had interviewed hundreds of beings who had witnessed the liberation wars firsthand. The pattern was always the same. Humans would appear not as conquerors but as liberators, offering weapons and tactical support to oppressed populations. Once the former slaves had won their freedom, humans would help them establish democratic governments and then withdraw to defensive positions. The scholar's research had uncovered the true scope of human preparation for their eventual military awakening. For 30 years, they had been secretly contacting oppressed species throughout the galaxy and offering aid to resistance movements. The Rocky Mountain facility that Dr. Linda Hayes had managed was just one of dozens of similar installations, where alien refugees had shared intelligence about their former masters. "They turned our own subjects against us," complained former hegemony Crystal Lord Thaknus during one of Zephi's interviews. The crystalline being had lost 17 worlds in a single day when human-armed slaves rose up against their crystal overlords. "We thought we were facing a primitive species with limited technology. Instead, we discovered they had been planning our destruction for decades." Dr. Hayes now served as Earth's chief xenological advisor, and she maintained the expanded network of alien volunteers who continued to provide intelligence about potential threats to Federation members. The facility beneath the Rocky Mountains had grown to include representatives from over 200 species, all working to ensure that the old patterns of oppression could never return. "The galaxy is learning that there are consequences for bullying behavior," Linda explained to a group of visiting diplomats from newly independent worlds. "Humans spent 30 years being patient and reasonable, but we were also watching and learning. Every insult was remembered. Every injustice was recorded. Every weakness was cataloged for future reference." The transformation was perhaps most visible on worlds like New Montana, where Mayor Bill Thompson had led the first successful resistance against alien demands for evacuation. The agricultural colony had become a symbol of human determination, and its population had swelled to over 10 million as refugees from across the galaxy sought the protection of Federation membership. Bill still served as mayor, but he had also been elected as the first speaker of the colonial assembly that represented all human settlements outside the Sol system. His mechanical arm had been replaced with a more advanced prosthetic, but he still wore it as a reminder of the price his family had paid during the early years of colonization. "We are not the same species that left Earth 40 years ago," Bill said during his address to the Assembly's annual gathering. "We learned to be farmers and miners and scientists, but we never forgot that we were also the children of a world that tried to kill us every day. When the galaxy forced us to choose between surrender and survival, we remembered what we really were." The memorial wall that Jake Morrison had visited before sending his fateful message to Earth had been expanded into a vast complex, honoring all the beings who had died fighting for freedom during the Liberation Wars, the original plaque remembering the 12,000 human colonists killed at New Berlin was now surrounded by millions of names from dozens of species. The wall had become a pilgrimage site for beings throughout the galaxy who wanted to understand how the Great Transformation had begun. Visitors would stand before the memorial and try to imagine what it must have been like when humans finally decided that patience and diplomacy had failed. Commander Lisa Park now ran the Federation intelligence service that monitored potential threats to member worlds. Her agents included humans and aliens working together to prevent the rise of new oppressive regimes. The galaxy had learned to fear the arrival of human peacekeepers, but potential tyrants had learned to fear Lisa's operatives even more. "Prevention is always better than intervention," Lisa explained to her mixed species staff during their monthly briefing. "We identify threats before they become actions, and we eliminate problems before they become wars. The galaxy has seen what happens when humans stop being nice. Our job is to make sure they never have to see it again." The story concluded 50 years later in a classroom on the multi-species world of Harmony, where young beings from dozens of civilizations learned about galactic history. The teacher was a descendant of one of the original human colonists, but her students included the children of former enemies and allies alike. The Great Liberation began when Deathworlders stopped being diplomatic and remembered they were predators, the teacher explained to her attentive students. But the most important lesson is not about military power or political change. It is about the difference between choosing to be peaceful and being forced to be weak. A young crystalline student raised her hand with a question that showed how much the galaxy had changed. "Teacher, why did the humans help our ancestors gain freedom instead of just conquering everyone like the old empires did?" The teacher smiled at the question because it demonstrated that the new generation understood something their grandparents had not. Because humans learned that the strongest societies are built on cooperation rather than domination, they discovered that willing allies are more valuable than conquered subjects. Most importantly, they proved that true strength comes from protecting others rather than exploiting them. The lesson ended with the students reciting the Federation motto that had been written by Jake Morrison himself in the months after the Liberation Wars.